Lifeline. They're throwing it out there, and we're excited to support them in that work. Pastor Phil, why don't you come and share with us tonight?
We send out to Cuba, New Mexico. That's the post office right there. You can see it. We used to go there once in a while to shop or to do some things. I forget what all we did in Cuba. It was 35 miles south of our mission. It was across the Continental Divide. And then we have a little post office in Nageezi, New Mexico. Let's see if I can get this to work. There's Nageezi, New Mexico. I went in there, asked the lady how many boxes they had and like that. And she said, hey, if you have literature, you can put it right out here on the table. On the counter, must have been a Christian girl, and there was a Navajo girl and in the post office. And that was real nice of them. And we went down through Farmington and came to a water flow. Wait a minute, that's the wrong one.
I think it's on an automatic or something.
Uh-oh.
Let me go check that out.
Yeah, because there's Nelson. And water flow, New Mexico. We went to church. We saw that there was a church in back of the post office, and that evening we went to the church. We got there a little bit early. I had never been to the church. There was a Bible church, as I recall. I don't remember the pastor's name or like that. We had a good time worshiping with them. There was a bunch of Navajos. I got to pray in Navajo with the group, and there was a real nice time. Then we went to Kirtland, New Mexico, and we were going to places where we had sent. And I had driven by some of these places a lot because we used to live there. We would take people from our mission when we first moved to New Mexico in 1970. We would take them if they were sick. One time we had a baby. Wilda was a nurse. We went out as a teacher and a nurse, and they had a baby that was in bad shape, just a little thing, just a newborn. I mean, brand new. And it died a couple of times on the way, and Wilda was reviving this baby, and I was driving like crazy. She was a maternity nurse. She knew what she was doing. And we got there, it was 100 miles to the hospital, which was away. Where do I point this? That's still Cuba. I don't know, do I have this on or off? Here we go. Now is it on? Where do I point it? Beam me up. No, have to tase these things. And the baby kept dying, but the baby survived. As far as I know, it's grown to adulthood. Hope the baby did okay. That's Nageezi, New Mexico. I started a church in Nageezi. We found some people there. Our mission knew a lot of people, and Angie Gerber took me around to meet folks. And I was lining up meetings to preach. I would write out my message in English and then translate it into Navajo during the week. And I was finding places to preach. I was determined. This was after I'd come back from seminary, so that we didn't stay as a teacher and a nurse. That's Kirtland. We came back as a preacher and a church planner. Actually, they told me I was doing adult ministries. The main thrust of our mission was a school. This is in San Ysidro. It's just a little crossroads, but up the road where we find the Hamas post office there. It served the Hamas Pueblo. Pueblos are closed. They had a sign along the road that said, don't take any pictures, don't stop and take pictures. Well, I held the camera out the window and took a picture of Hamas Pueblo. You might pray for Hamas. It's tough to get students from the Pueblos. They have a very tight-knit community. I showed you a picture of Raymond Perry this morning. He told us that God is working among the Pueblos. In fact, we met a couple at Arnold's church that was working with Pueblo Indians. And that was their target, if you want to say it that way. But Raymond Perry said that they're getting saved and they're wandering the streets. They kick them out of the Pueblo if they get saved, if they have a Bible study or anything, if they turn Christian. And he said you can find them wandering the streets in Albuquerque. In fact, if you go to Albuquerque, you see a lot of Indians wandering the streets. It's just filled with Indians. And It's a tough work. It's a tough work. You know, some of them, well, a lot of them go there to get jobs, is what they do. This is Johnson. Johnson has since passed away, but we started a church at Johnson's house. He had 10 daughters and 1 son. If you can find his son on there, you're doing pretty good. He's in the back. His wife is on the end and back on the right-hand side, and that's Victoria. And so that I had them all. We spoke at their first annual camp meeting. I was the speaker, and I was trying to figure out the names of everybody. We have Lucy and let me see, and Gloria and Marcy and Darlene's on there someplace, and Lula, and boy, I'd have to go over. I have to have it written out. But dear folks, and Johnson and Nancy. Nancy is still living, as far as I know, and we have 2 of the daughters taking our lessons, and Gloria sent in one not too long ago, and we keep in touch a little bit that way to see how they're doing, And we were at the camp meeting, and Nelson Harrison, came up to me and said, "You know who I am?" And I didn't remember right away, and he said, "Middle Hill." I said, Nelson Harrison. I'd had the tent up at Middle Hill, and that's how you say that altogether. Okay, anyhow, Middle Hill, it was a bastion, it was a stronghold of peyote and traditional. It can be both, you know. So that I'd had the tent up there, and I had Jimmy Begay speaking. I didn't feel confident at the time to be speaking in the tent meetings. I worked up to that. But nobody got saved. Johnson came. I have a picture of Johnson sitting in a tent. But anyhow, I was taking the tent down, and Nelson came over and told me that his wife and baby daughter had just been born. We're in the hospital. The baby wasn't doing so good. Her name was Velma. The wife's name was Thelma, if you can keep that straight. And he wanted to know if I could take him there, if I could pray for him. But we prayed right there. Here at the camp meeting, he came up to me and reminded me of that. I had forgotten I had actually taken him into Albuquerque to the hospital. It was 100 miles or so. And he said, "But when you prayed, that's when I got saved." And his wife got up and gave a testimony. That's Thelma. And confirmed it. She said it saved our marriage. Interesting. I hadn't realized that. It was years later. He came down to the camp meeting just to tell me that. And, that was 30 years before. Interesting how the Lord works. But, for years I thought, well, we didn't have any results at that tent meeting. But we did when I was taking that tent down. Interesting. He had been trying to fix his car. He had his carburetor all apart. He was working down the sand. Had his parts spread out in the dirt. He was never going to get the car working out or anything. And he was discouraged. But he moved away. We left the mission. And he took his family, and they moved up to Colorado. Around Alamosa, Colorado, they have a lot of farms. It's on the Rio Grande River. The Rio Grande starts up in those mountains. And they do potatoes and agricultural stuff and like that. But he was working up there, living up there. He said to get away from all the alcohol and all the stuff that his family was doing. That you remember, I showed you a squad dance this morning. They had a squad dance. That was for his brother, Alfred, who had been drinking, and he's gone now. He died. His wife takes our lessons. Pauline takes our lessons, has for a long time. This is our best student right here, Virginia. I don't know if she looks like the best student or not, but she's our best student. She made us a rug to show her gratitude for the lessons and gave us a rug. Her husband, Harry, had given me a bolo tie. I'm wearing it there in the picture a few years before when we were out. I used to hold tent meetings at their house and revivals. Once, the first one I held right in their house, they cleared all the furniture out. And they had me hold the meeting right in their house. That's the way the medicine man does it. Has them clear all the furniture out of the hogan and like that. And then he sets up there and does his sand painting and and chants and all that stuff, and has his prayer sticks and his jish, the bag of his stuff he uses in his sing, in his ceremony is called his jish. And I would joke around, I would carry my Bible and everything, she jish, that's my jish, ha ha, I make a Navajo joke. And then I was reading a book, an anthropological study on the Navajos, and it had names for things, and they had pictures of the stuff that was in the medicine man's dish, and they had a prayer stick. There was a talking prayer stick. They had one, I guess it wasn't talking, but they had a talking prayer stick. Kaitan, that's prayer stick. Yachchit, Iggy, that's a talking prayer stick. Yachchit is, it speaks, or he speaks. And the Kaitan Yachchit, Iggy, and the Iggy means that specific one. Anyhow, Kaitan Yachchit, and I would use that for my guitar, make a joke, ha ha ha. I have a, and they call their medicine man a singer. They don't call him a medicine man. They call him, the shaman is a singer. Hatkachli. Altogether, hatkachli. Hatkachli. You don't say just a T. You say it's kind of in the back of your throat. Ha. Anyhow, hatkachli. You got to say it the way they do, or it sounds funny to them. And you don't want it to sound funny to them. Talking once with a bunch of people, and there was a blind lady there, and she poked somebody and said, "Is he Navajo or white guy?" Said it in Navajo. Well, that was a compliment. I was just, but anyhow, Harry's dad had been a medicine man. His brother had been a preacher, a Baptist preacher, a Southern Baptist, and Harry went on to be a government official. He was a base bond also on it. He had a badge. I mean, the base is the badge that they have. He had councilman, and then he was a chapter president and like that. He was into politics. But I held a revival there, I think twice under the tent, and once in a school bus I had rigged out to do revival meetings. And that was, well, it was bitter. It was a bitter winter. Snow was blowing outside. I had a wood stove there with a fire in it. It was warm in the bus, all except for the floor. The floor was cold as anything. But anyhow, they gave me some black coffee to drink. I've only had 2 or 3 cups of coffee in my whole life, but that was one of them. I remember that one. Whoo, that coffee. They must have boiled that all day. They take the pot and they put water in it. They have a water tank. They dip it out from their water tank. They use old ammunition cans for water. And they have this stove going, and they take a handful of coffee and they put it in the pot and boil it. All day long. But anyhow, we met Harry in Virginia when they were young and we were young, and up at Cortez, Colorado, where I was helping out and learning Navajo at the Navajo Bible Institute for a semester. We got there in January, 1st of January about, and we stayed through April. They had the graduation. But they were helping me learn. They had 13 students. Didn't sound like much. But the Indian Bible College has 2 or 3. You don't realize that. But if you click on Indian Bible College, it'll come up. It's in Flagstaff. But anyhow, and Harry and Virginia were there in the Bible school and living there on the campus. And Harry took off drinking one night. As long as I've known him, every once in a while he'll take off drinking. He just cannot beat that alcohol. He just cannot. We were out there a few years ago, and Harry had taken off drinking. And Virginia had gotten he went into Cuba, which is nearest town, about 30 miles away. And Virginia got to somehow. She had an extra set of keys for the car, and she drove the truck home. Harry had to walk. But she's our best student. She's the farthest along, and we've known them. We knew their kids. They had Perry, Derry, and Terry, Fanny, and Faye, and then they had Veronica and Vicky. And were there any more? I think that's all. Anyhow, and the kids were doing pretty good, all except for Perry. He got burned to death. He got burned. Sad as all. I met the widow because we were at the graduation party for Veronica. She graduated from college. And we just happened to be there when they were having a party, and we had been invited, and Virginia sent us an invitation. She's a very proper woman, and writes nice notes and says nice Christmas cards, and just a dear, dear person. And so what was I saying? I got off 2 tracks.
Went to the graduation party.
Yeah, graduation party. And I forget what track I was on. But anyhow. Huh? What'd she say? I'm so deaf I can't hear myself think.
You were talking about their son had passed away in a fire.
Oh, yeah, Perry. Yeah, I met the widow. So that Perry was married, and he was working a barbecue, outdoor and he evidently tossed some gasoline on the fire, and the can exploded and like that. And yeah, awful, tragic, just, you can't imagine. But that was Perry and his widow, beautiful girl. Here at Johnson's church, that's Darlene. She was keeping the church going. Her dad was not doing so good with the Alzheimer's, but she was keeping the church going. That's her little daughter, Naomi. She had been married and had just one kid, I think. And her husband said he was going back to peyote, and she said she wasn't, and he left, and she let him go. She was going to stay with Jesus. Interesting, but she's doing a good job. I'm not sure. I think some other folks were helping out now. They were trying to get their brother to be the preacher. I'm not sure that he took them up on that. But here is Nancy Chiquito's brother, Tom Garito. I've known him for a long time. And he had a problem with alcohol, but he's overcome that. And he's a pastor of a church not too far from Johnson's church. It's an independent Baptist church, and it's a Living Springs Baptist church. Got a call from Louisiana, and a lady named Hutchins called me. Somehow she got my name, and I think Hibbard gave her my name, and she wanted to talk to me about mission trips out there. They had been out there before. She wanted to know if I had any suggestions for their next mission trip going out there. They took, I think it was 45 people or something like that out there. I mean, there were probably 10 or 11 Navajos and 40. And they were going to do an eyeglass clinic, and they were going to hand out clothes, and they were going to do this and that and some other thing. Anything but preaching, I don't do all the other stuff. When I was out there, I tried some things. And I finally, after busing people into the mission and doing this, I was breaking springs on the bus. I was driving too fast, and the roads were just washboard bumpy. The mechanic was not happy with me because I was breaking springs on the bus. And so that I thought, the medicine man, the singer, the Hatkasli, doesn't go around knocking on doors. What he does is he sits in his hogan, and people come to him and say, would you hold a ceremony for us? A night way or a blessing way or a squad dance or whatever it is. They have a bunch of different ceremonies that they do. And the people, they do it for individuals. The religion is centered around the individual, so that they chant through the story of the holy people and the different monsters and Spider Woman and all this. And when they come to a part of the story where the holy people solve the problem that they had, that then this person has too, well, then they do that ceremony, whatever the holy people did, the Dean and that, whatever they did, then the medicine man draws a sand painting, has a person sit on it, and that solves their problem for them. Right? Anyhow, they think it does. And so that's their ceremony, what they do. And whatever I was saying, I forget. But here's Tom. And Tom got to preaching. And he told me, he said, that's his wife playing the guitar and his daughter on the left side of the picture, and his son-in-law, Chester, standing behind him. Tom said, my grandfather told me that when our people had been taken to Bosque Redondo, it was like a concentration camp for the Navajos. Kit Carson rounded them up. He burned all their cornfields, burned their peach orchards, burned their homes, and he just devastated their land so that they couldn't provide for themselves. And they had to come into Fort Defiance for food. And he rounded them up and took them off. There's 300 miles or so, whatever it is, over to Bosque Redondo. Maybe it's 600 miles. I have to check on a map. But anyhow, they were over there on the Pecos River, which at that point is pretty much alkaline, and the soil wouldn't grow the crops, and the locusts ate what they had anyhow, and they gave them wheat flour to make something out of for food, and they didn't know how to use wheat flour. They always had corn and ground their own corn and had cornmeal, blue cornmeal, you know. There was no taste to it. They make like a porridge out of it. It doesn't taste like anything. You have to eat a peanut butter sandwich with it to have some taste in your mouth. But anyhow, they like they can pat it into cakes and cook it on top of the stove. So you have like a blue hamburger, right? but it's cornmeal, yeah. And but he said they wanted to go home, back to their home territory, and they used all their ceremonies, prayed to all their gods and the holy people, everything, did all their stuff that a medicine man could do, and they didn't have any success. They weren't allowed to go back, and there was a missionary came by, probably a Catholic, that said, "Why don't you try Jesus?" And they talked it over among themselves, and this is what he was telling me that his grandfather told him. And they talked it over among themselves. Said, "Okay, we'll try Jesus." And they tried Jesus, and pretty soon here comes, was it Sherman or Sheridan? Was under Grant? It was under Grant. Was the Secretary of the Interior? He came along and let them go home. They answered their prayer to Jesus. I don't know how they prayed to Jesus. I don't know if they did a chant or what they did. Blow some smoke. The holiest of all substances is corn pollen. And they sprinkle it to the directions. They get up early in the morning. The door has to face the east. If the hogan always faces the east. And so they get up early and they chant a prayer and sprinkle corn pollen. They call it shines all around. Kadadin, it shines all around. So, we could supply them with corn pollen around here. We have a lot of corn pollen. They had to come over to our side because we have some righteous corn pollen here. And in Iowa has corn that grows 10 feet tall. Your uncle was telling me that. He lives out there. He says, it does. And Mrs. Hurlbert is from there. And she says, yes, it does. Yes, it does. 10 feet tall. But and your grandpa didn't believe him. And he got out of the car and walked over to the cornfield. Sure enough, 10 feet tall. Oh, boy. Indians didn't know what they're doing. But that's what Tom was telling me. I checked it with him. He was telling it first in Navajo when he was preaching the afternoon service. And then I checked it with him when I was standing in line for the potluck. And he said that's what it was. Here's Harvey Bitsilli and his wife. And Harvey has since passed on. Here's Dorothy. I'm talking with Helen. I baptized Helen years before. She went blind. She's sitting in there. She can't see. I had worked with the family, the missionary Christians, good Christians, held, I don't know how many revivals at Edna's house. That's Helen's mom. And so it was nice to see Helen again. She couldn't see me. Here's Wilda's friend Hetty, and she's a good girl. That's Tom and Nancy's sister, the Garritos. And here's a church. I started that church, started building it, and I came down with hepatitis. I had the floor laid. I had the floor joist in. I was going to put up the walls. But I got sick with hepatitis. I was down for a month. And I was out of circulation for a long time, but finally got better pretty much from the hepatitis. I drank the Kool-Aid instead of the coffee. Should have drank the Kool-Aid at the camp meeting instead of the coffee. But that's they call it Dove Springs or De Mesa. Hospitatoire is the Dove Springs. They name a lot of things after water because water is so scarce out there. Let me see which slide we're on. have them all printed out here in a thing. Here's Darlene. Okay, church. They had a youth thing. They were doing their own VBS at the camp meeting, and then they were playing some volleyball. You can't see it, but Rafael Mbugwa is there. The Johnson's granddaughter, married a Kenyan man. He's been in our church. If you remember, it was a few years ago, Holly and Raphael were here, and she had a degree in chemistry. She was mixing frack water for Halliburton, is what her job was. And I think they were here for about 2 years. But then here's Victoria. At the camp meeting, Victoria stood up and said, "I'm getting saved right now." She'd been married to Johnny, the one boy, for years. They had kids that were teenagers, and her family was all in the POD. She was from the Kitso family, so that they were all into the POD. They tell me Grandpa Kitso had 4 wives and a lot of kids and grandkids like that. But anyhow, some of them got saved, not through my efforts, but here was Victoria. She had never accepted the Lord, and there was pressure from her family not to. But she went with her husband, and I don't know if there's another couple or like that. They took a trip to Chicago, and they made it there and back. And since the Lord helped them to make it there and back, she was going to follow Jesus. You never know what's going to speak to her heart, do you? You just don't know. But she came to the Lord right there at the camp meeting. Everybody was so happy. They've been praying for her, they told me, for a long time. Here they are cooking ribs and intestines on the grill. They take the intestines and they squeeze them out, you know? You know how you do? You don't know how you do. But you want to be sure you squeeze them out. And they fry them on the grill. They say they're good. I wouldn't know. Yeah, but the ladies were doing that. They were having a good time doing that. And the men were staying around watching and talking and keeping the generator going and doing some things. And if you look there on the left side of the picture, that's Lloyd. What was his last name? I forget. He's not Navajo. Maybe you can tell by looking he's not Navajo. Can you spot a Navajo? He doesn't look Navajo, does he? Say no. Yeah. So that he is Spanish. There are settlements in New Mexico of Spanish people, not Mexicans, but Spanish from the conquistadors. They're white people, and you don't know unless you start talking to them. I mean, maybe you can tell. It might be a little Spanish, but I asked him if he was one. He said, "Well, yeah, I guess I would be." And I've known a number of them, but there are settlements of these Spanish people that descend from the conquistadors, and so that they're usually dyed-in-the-wool Catholic, very you wouldn't say radical, but very pious Catholics. And some of them have special societies where they self-flagellate, they beat themselves with whips and do some things on their special holy days and so forth. Very strange to us, but out there, that's what the folks do. And he was at the camp meeting. I talked to him. I don't know if he was saved or not, but having a good time. Here's Seth. He didn't speak any Navajo. He only knows English. But there's no crime, There's no crime. But he was learning some Bible verses. Here's Naomi with her kids are so cute. And here's some spurious guy preaching up there and laying forth the word. The one meeting that I had, I preached 5 nights, I think it was. The one meeting, I had practiced reading the book of Ruth. And I can read Navajo just like I'm speaking it. And I had worked at it. I would practice an hour a day reading. But I practiced up on the book of Ruth. I read the whole book of Ruth for one of the meetings. and try to encourage the people to read a little bit, you know. And I was having a good time preaching. Nothing like preaching. The places that preach become holy ground. And I met with some of the folks after the meetings one day, and I was going over all the places I'd preached and all the things we'd done, and how the Lord had helped us back here and worked with our kids and this and that. They were interested to see what the Lord had done. I said to Darlene, you know, I was holding those revival meetings, and it was a lot of work, but I'm glad I did it. And she said, we are too. We are too. Here are two folks from Brooklyn, New York. He had been a postal worker, and she was a school teacher. And they retired out to New Mexico. They said, take a picture of that hill across from our house. Oh, okay. And so Charles and Sandra, was that Bundy? We're taking our lessons. They don't anymore. We stopped by their place the last time Charles came to the gate, but we didn't see Sandy. He wasn't all that friendly, but he worked with fiberglass. And the Spanish people found that he could make images. And they had him busy making statues, making images to worship idols, you know. Here's Eliza Montoya, another Spanish lady that takes our lessons. She still does. She still does take our lessons. She lost, was it a son in Afghanistan? So sad. But we're glad for her, Eliza. She's been faithful. She lives in Youngsville, I think it is. That doesn't sound very Spanish, but it's north of the Jemez Mountains. We stopped to see, is this Victoria? Haven't gotten a lesson from her for a while. We went to Shiprock. That's the Shiprock way. They don't call it Shiprock. They call it Rock Ring. Rock Ring, or Rock Rings. Little Feather is is ring or feather. So now, you know, we have a lady up in Alaska that wants to be called. She says her name is Little Feather, and she writes it in Navajo. I don't know if she's Athabascan or Athabascan and Navajo are the same language, you know. So up in Alaska. This is Annie on the right-hand side, and she takes our lessons. She writes us nice letters. She was a greeter at Walmart for a long time. She's not working now, I don't think. So I hope she gets back there. If you ever think of her, pray for Annie Begay. He asked her why she never got married. She said she never found the right man. Never found the right man. But some women find the wrong man. Here we have one of our students we met in Farmington. She was having awful health problems. Is this Gloria? Is that her name? And we went to see her. Or she came to see us at the motel. This is Fern. They got kicked out of the Ute Reservation. This is Harrison. What was his first name? I forget. But he had a number of brothers and sisters that we had in school down at the mission. I don't remember him. He was in school before I got there. But his dad had two wives, I remember. And I was out to visit them with Angie Gerber one time. We got stuck in the mud. Man, it took me a while to get out. It was cold. I thought it had frozen over, but the car broke through the ice and got down in the ruts and in the mud. I had to, well, what you do in a case like that, see, is you build a little platform right in the back of the car with some sagebrush. You break it off and build a little platform. And they have high lift jacks that are this high. They sell them down here at Harbor Freight. And we always carried one of those. They have cylinders that go in and out. You have, you know, and they work through, you don't know. But anyhow, and so I put the jack onto a little platform of sagebrush. Do you want to hear this? And I held the jack real tight right here. And I jacked the car up till both wheels were off the ground. Then pushed it over. You have to get out of the way real quick. Because when it goes, pow, you know. And if you do that a couple of times, you're out of the rut. So I finally got out. But the one time the cylinders got stuck and the handle snapped back and it bashed my thumb, it hurt for a year or two. Yeah, things happen. Missionary life isn't all that nice, but But he was taking our lessons. I don't think he is anymore, but he was living near Farmington. You know, we go back there, a lot of our friends have died. We go through the cemetery. Here's a cemetery, and I say, yeah, I know that one. There's held a meeting at their house, so forth. And I see these folks. There's an urgency to the task. People are passing away. We've had a number of students die from COVID, and not just Betty Barlow, but Annie has had some, as I recall. Who was it wrote us and said her sister died and her brother's wife died. You know, COVID is really wreaking havoc out there, and they're locked down over the weekend. They have lockdowns and curfews. I know they're trying some things. Maybe the vaccine will help. I don't know. We have a time frame where if we don't reach them now, we're not ever going to reach them. We need to do something now while there's opportunity. And if you're going to use your life for the Lord, make a decision and say, well, I'll go. I'll do it. We left Wrightsville, Pennsylvania in 1970. We decided to go out to the mission. And it took us 6 days to get there. Had all our worldly possessions in this U-Haul trailer, which would sway like that. Oh man, it was scary. But we made it. And the Lord has kept us and preserved us every mile. And I could tell you more stories. But it was the best decision we ever made. I've never been sorry I made that decision. Following Jesus across the country to the seminary and back again, across the reservation, do meetings, preach of the gospel. You know, if I hadn't done it then, if I had waited until I retired to serve the Lord, I never would have been able to do that. But serve the Lord, and He'll take care of you. That's what I found. And if we're faithful, He's certainly faithful. And we don't do anything perfectly, but He does. This is a sash belt. Bessie Castillo made this for me. Bessie Castillo and her husband Roy have since gone back to Peyote, from what I understand. She used to come to the revival meetings. And she made this just so I could use it for a guitar strap, because I was all the time playing the guitar out there. Spent half my life behind the guitar, you know. And music has been a big part of my life. And I enjoy doing it. I can't hardly do it anymore. But anyhow, it's been a great thing. Here's my old preaching Bible. 647, I'm watching that. And God was, I have my notes in here. I wrote something, I don't know, something like I did it with knees. Writing phrases down, how to say something. I'd ask somebody how to say something, I write the phrase down. And I learned how to pray that way. I said, how do you say, help so-and-so to get better, you know. And they told me, but this was the preaching Bible. And I have a book that's a preach that everything the gospel touches adds value to it. And if you serve the Lord, your life takes on greater value. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for helping us all these years, for guiding us and giving us a ministry now to reach out through the mail. We pray that we be able to keep doing that and not get hindered by any government crackdown or regulations or like that. Help us to be able to reach out to more people and have better response, and to keep the lessons going. Pray that Virginia would be able to keep taking the lessons, that Harry would lay hold on eternal life, and that you meet the needs of the people at Johnson's church and Thule's church and out at Trujillo's church out in Arizona, that you be with these dear people. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.